So, welcome to another episode of A Spotlight On. And today we are joined by Juno, and we're doing a spotlight on how different people are affected by HIV with a particular focus on trans people. Juno, thank you so much for joining us.
That's okay, it's a pleasure.
Thank you. So, Juno is an author, a writer, a trans activist, an author of 3 books, Queer Sex, Trans Power, and recently released Gender Explorers, about the experiences of young people. Can you just share a little bit about who you are and what you do, Juno?
Yeah, so I am, as you said, I'm a writer. And I kind of feel like I'm quite old now, especially talking to people that are between 11 and 16. I kind of feel like I'm quite old. So I kind of feel like I've been doing what I do in terms of activism for a long time, since the late 80s, early 90s, which is like last century. And I started off kind of helping to establish housing cooperatives for young people that who defined themselves as LGBTQ plus. Even back then, we were still kind of trying to aim to kind of reach those people. And I became HIV positive, I don't know, about 27 odd years ago now. I became HIV positive in the very early 90s, before there were any medications, and before before there was much, but we weren't given a lot of hope, really. So I've kind of lived through the whole of the HIV pandemic. And I suppose that informs my writing. My writing is about gender and about so-called marginalized communities, and people that are forced to live at the edges of society, and about HIV and about how HIV impacts upon that. So yeah, that's me. And I'm from London. I'm a Londoner, but I now live in most of the time in the mountains, in the middle of nowhere in Andalusia. Literally, I am in the middle of nowhere, and yeah, and I'm very happy here. So,
And the pictures of where you are now look absolutely beautiful. Like every so often when you post them, it's like, oh my gosh, it looks so beautiful.
It's like a really weird thing I never imagined, maybe, and it's quite useful because when I was younger, certainly when I became HIV positive, etc., people kind of wrote my life off, and it's like I'm in my 50s now, and my 50s have been brilliant. I get to be a writer, I get to write books, and I get to live in this beautiful house in the middle of nowhere in the mountains. And for a queer kid from Peckham, who was told that they wouldn't amount to much, if this is possible for me, literally anything is possible. It's like it has to be. So yeah, I'm very happy.
So you mentioned that you write a lot about gender as well as many other things. Yeah. And your latest book, Gender Explorers, focuses on the experience of young trans and non-binary people. Could you just explain to us, before I ask you about the book, could you just explain to us what transgender means and why it was so important for you, that you felt that these experiences of young people were important to capture?
So what being transgender means to me is, I think, is probably really different to young people, which is why I wanted to capture what they were thinking first of all. But I suppose the easiest way to kind of view it is that I was born into a body that was defined one by society. So society being my parents, the people in the hospital, I'm actually so the midwife, the people around who would look at my body and say, that's a boy. And I never ever felt that. I never ever felt the last thing in my life I've ever felt is anything like a boy or like a man. I never felt that. And so the way that people saw my body was entirely different to how I felt inside. So there was like a discordance. So it wasn't harmonious. So there was a disharmony, or I'm not sure if that's a word, but there was like a something that never kind of like fitted or never kind of settled down. So when people would look at me, they would talk to me, and I would think, who are they talking to? They would use a name and a pronoun, and they would just, I describe it to people that when people would talk to me, they would use a name and a pronoun. It would come towards me and then just drop on the ground, and I felt forever nameless and pronounless until I named myself. So, but you know, I went through that process. I started that process in my 30s. I'm now in my 50s. So that's like a good 25 odd years ago. So when I transitioned back then, you had to definitely go from A to B. And A was saying, I'm not a man, I feel like a woman, or I'm not a woman, I feel like a man. And that's what you definitely had to do. But for younger people growing up now, it's an entirely different thing. And I wanted to capture what that different thing was. So that's why I wrote the book. And I hope that really sums up, you know, being transgender just means that the way you feel, and I think all of us feel like that in a way. Society boxes all of us into gender. You know, if you're a boy, then boys act like this. And if you're a girl, girls act like this. And if you don't do that, society kind of starts to tell us that we're wrong. And if you're trans, it's just that you definitely don't feel that like that. I definitely never felt like a boy.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you, and I think it's one of the many reasons why your work is so important, because I think all people, and I love the fact that you said so-called marginalized, but people who are not able to have the space that we deserve, whether it's because of ethnicity, whether it's because of gender, whether it's because of class, often we are, or whether it's because of HIV status, often we're
Yeah,
kind of presented as one thing, and this is it, and this
yeah,
is all you've got, and this is the
yeah,
stereotype. And I think
yeah,
your work is just so important because it just shows the sheer vastness and richness of what
yeah.
trans means.
Yeah, I think as well for me, it's that thing of like, it's always been really important for me to be, so like I was told as like a trans person who lived with HIV, who was working class, that I'd never become anything. That's what society told me. Society told me that I would always live at the edges, I would always be hard to reach, I would always be at risk, and I'd always be, and actually, I have this really beautiful life now that I was told I wasn't entitled to have. You know, and we can have whatever we want to have. We just have to, it's the fight. It's not, I'm not saying it's not a fight. I've had to fight every step of the way and still do have to fight every step of the way. But actually, you know, it's entirely that the whole notion that we're marginalized and that we're whatever, you know, it's just that there's some people that won't give up the center ground. They won't give up the center ground. And we have to kind of like, if we know that and we're smart and we're clever, we can work around that, you know.
Thank you. And what advice would you maybe give for young people who want to be able to take up more space, whether that's talking about any part of their identity that they feel is
Yeah.
not being spoken about in an authentic way?
So I think there's like a few things to do. And I think one is educate yourself. The more educated you are, the more, and that doesn't mean that you have to become learned. It doesn't mean that you have to go to Cambridge or Oxford and do a degree and a PhD. It's not about that. It's about the stuff that you want to know, find out about it, read books about it, visit galleries, visit museums, visit other countries. So find out about your history, find out about what you need to make yourself walk taller and walk stronger, because that's what was always important to me. So what is it I need to know to be able to move through this world with a kind of confidence, so that other people that want to knock me off and say, well, you live with HIV, you're a trans person, you must have done this, you must be, you know, so that I can say, no, you know what I am, I'm a thinker. I'm a thinker. That's what I want. I said to my mum a while ago, what I want on my grave, not that I'm going to die anytime soon, but what I want on my grave is just thinker, you know, because it's like I want to own that and kind of luxuriate in that. And I think that, so I would say a couple of things. I'd say educate yourself, but educate yourself in a way that matters to you, because education has to work for you. So consume that stuff however you need to consume it. So it might be that you watch videos or you watch films or you do audiobooks, however it is. But also just recognize that you are a whole myriad of things. That's a whole bunch of different things that you don't know yet. So when someone says to you that you live with HIV, you know, you're like, you know, like, but you could say to them, but, you know, I'm also these other things that I don't know yet. And all of this stuff that I don't know yet is the stuff that I can become. So as you walk, recognize that you're walking into yourself that you don't know yet. So each step forward that you take is going into the you that isn't decided yet. So no one can tell you what you can be or what you can't be. because actually your space can be as vast as you want it to be. I'm like a kid from Peckham who never thought that they would have a back garden, let alone I open the doors to my house and I look out over mountains. I literally look out over mountains. When I walk my dogs, I walk up into mountains. I have vast space, and people told me that I could never have that. So don't listen to anyone who tells you that you're not going to make anything of your life. You will make it exactly what you need it to be, and educate yourself along the way. And the last thing is look after yourself. So know when to step back, know when to step back and relax, know when to step back and have a siesta or sleep in the afternoon. Know when to say to your friends, you know what, I'd love to, but I can't. I really need to just step back. And also know when to have fun. Know when to step away from education and have fun. So those are my three things. Educate. Don't listen to anyone who tells you, because your future is not told yet. Your future is not written yet. So your future, you write your future. No one else gets to write it. Only you get to write it. And also look after yourself on that journey.
Thank you so much, Juno. Yeah, thank you so much. It's very important for me to hear as well, and everyone else is going to be listening. It's important to be reminded. So thinking about HIV, we know that there are different groups who are more impacted by HIV. You know, people in the global south, and Black and brown people, young women in certain parts of the world, and also trans people and non-binary people, to name a few. Those are some of the people that come straight to my head, and of course gay and bisexual men. Could you talk us through why you think trans people are one of the more affected groups?
Well, I think it's really important to kind of drill that down and to say that, you know, I've done lots of research on this over the last few years, and actually the group of people who are most at risk who are trans are Black and brown trans women. we have to own that, because, you know, at the moment they're still being thrown asunder. No one is, you know, the funding that is dedicated to working out how we protect Black and brown trans women is minimal. So we need to work on that. And I need to use my privilege as a white trans person to create structures, or to give up structures, to walk away from them, so that we do. But I kind of think it's that, you know, we're pushed to the edge of society. People say, well, you know, trans people go through this process, and historically we've gone through this process of saying this body doesn't quite work for me. And how society has interpreted that is by us saying that we're broken. And we're broken, and therefore we don't work. And in a sense, then we're pushed to the edges of society. And I think that happens to a whole bunch of people. I think if you listen to dark-skinned Black people talk about the way that society has viewed dark skin, or, you know, it's like these broken models of like what works, because what works is white men, white cis men at the center. And I think that, so trans people, especially Black and brown trans people, have been pushed to the very edges of society. So it's difficult for them to go and see their doctor, because their doctor says, I don't understand you. I don't get you. What are you? You know, people ask those questions. What are you? Are you a man or a woman? What are you? You know, what is it you want? Who are you trying to please? Who are you trying to be? So it becomes more difficult to integrate with a kind of with basic medical care, because you're pushed to the edges. And you know, in lots of countries, you're literally humiliated. You know, you're rejected. I mean, I've done research on countries where people, if they turn up dressed as themselves, then they're sent away. They're told to go away. They're told to go, and they have to detransition every day. And detransition just means that you stop your process of transitioning to the point at which you feel comfortable. So I think, you know, in truth, that the same with all marginalized communities, is that we're only marginalized because the systems and the structures that are set up keep us out. They keep pushing us out and keep pushing us to the edges. I mean, I've literally just done, I have here a whole pile of, I'm just going to lift this up. I know, I have here a whole pile of, because I'm writing a new chapter for a book, I have a whole pile of timelines of HIV and AIDS, the history of HIV and AIDS. And, you know, I printed off about 8 of them. And I printed off about 8 of them because I was trying to find anyone in the timelines that wasn't a white man or a white woman. women exist in the timeline.
How did that go for you trying to find that?
I literally, it's made me so annoyed that I'm trying to get funding through the Sophia Forum to see if we can create a timeline that includes Black women, African women, trans women, it's like anyone other than, the women that exist are Princess Di and Elizabeth Taylor. There are no, it's so of course, even in the history of it, when young people are at school and teachers print off, like they do a Google search, they print off a timeline of HIV and AIDS, the kids read through it, and if you were a young Black girl in school in London, you would read through it and go, well, this has got nothing to do with me. This can't be anything to do with me. And then people wonder why safe sex campaigns don't work, or why some people still don't think that HIV/AIDS has got anything to do with them. It's like we are written out of it. History writes us out of it. That's why I'm saying to the young people that might be watching this, you write your own history. Make sure you write it. That's why I became a writer, because I thought, I'm going to get this stuff down so that younger people can read it and know that, we're all right. We can do all right. Ignore that narrative. But, we're written out of history, and therefore we're written out of money, of finance. I did some research a while ago, and I found that less than 3% was dedicated globally to working out why Black and brown trans women were 49 times more likely to become to develop HIV or to contract HIV than any other group. I mean, how is that statistic? How is it that if you're a Black and brown trans woman in Latin America or in America, in North America, you're 49 times more likely to catch HIV or to contract HIV, but only less than 3% of funding is dedicated to working out why? I mean, we're not marginalized because of us. We're marginalized because of them. They're purposely closing their eyes to us. They're doing the hear no, see no. That's what's happening. And that's what we're up against. So the louder we are, the more that we occupy space. Sorry, I just said, but the louder we are, the more we occupy space. And don't listen to people when they tell us we're occupying space too forcefully. Just ignore that. Then you do your ears and don't listen to them. Because the louder we do them, the more we create history so that young people that come after us know that they're okay. We send ladders down for them.
I completely agree. And thank you so much for just highlighting those things. I think a lot of the time what isn't spoken about enough is the discrimination that does result in different groups of people being more impacted by HIV. But crucially as well, thank you so much for talking about the privilege that you have and how you'll use your platform to talk about other people, specifically in this case, Black and brown trans women, because I think it's something that all of us as HIV positive people, when we are in a position of privilege, so when we can amplify the experiences of other people, we should also think of how we can do that, as well as spotlighting our own needs as well, but yes to taking up space.
Well, the thing is that's all we've got at the end of the day, is that we live in a world that is divided by privilege and not privilege. Into that comes a whole bunch of other stuff, ethnicity, where we live, working class, and all that stuff. But essentially, people with privilege don't want to give it up, and they create structures around their privilege. And what we have to do is create our own structures of safety, and then we create ambition and aspiration and dreams, and all of that comes from that. But it's creating really solid bases, which is why, for me, writing books is a big deal, because no one can take those away from me. I will be, I'm not sure, I'm in my mid-50s, but my books will go beyond me. They'll still be here. Hopefully they won't go out of print, but even if they do, there'll be copies floating around, and there'll be copies on audio books. And so, it's leave trails for other people to follow, and leave footprints for other people to build up on, because it's kind of like treading on sand, really. Eventually it just becomes really hard, and it becomes a platform, and that platform matters. So, for me, if I go to do an event and I look at the stage and I see a group of white people on the stage, or a group of middle-aged trans women who are all white, then I say, well, I'm not going to get on the stage, because that's where we're at in history. It's no longer good enough to go on the stage and then say, you know, we shouldn't all be doing this, because all right, no, what you do is you walk away. And that might mean that you walk away from the fee. I'm not going to get paid if I walk away, but actually you have to do that. We have to, if we want better systems, if we want timelines that show us and our struggles, I want a timeline with Chiva on it. I want a timeline that documents the history of HIV and AIDS in the UK, and I want Chiva to be on it. I want the young people that make a difference now to be on it. I don't need Princess Di to be on it because she held a hand back in the day. I mean, that's brilliant that she did, but you know, it's like we want empowerment now that enables us to see ourselves and move forward. Certainly when, oh, I'm just going to get rid of that. Sorry. Yeah. That kind of ended my thing.
No, but I hear you. In terms of making sure the people who were the most impacted, that our stories are also told, as well as like not just constantly linking back to celebrities, however impactful they might have been in that moment. But yeah, I hear you in terms of just recognizing everyone that was involved.
I watched a film yesterday which talked volumes to me about privilege, and it was quite a long film, so I'm not going to. I try and break it down really simply. So it was a film that looked at the current pandemic we're going through. It looked at COVID-19 and it looked at the impact on different countries. And there was the head of the CDC, the Centre for Disease Control from Africa there, a fabulous man called John, who was talking about the situation, and he talked about the situation. I think it was the Democratic Republic of Congo. I think it was, and he was saying that, you know, what people don't understand is that Ebola was having such an impact in the country that people had to stop looking at measles. So they've been having a measles outbreak for the last 3 years. And now what's happened is that COVID's come along and it's having such an impact that people have stopped being able to look at Ebola. And what people also don't understand is that HIV's been going on for a really long time. So actually, if you live in that country, you know, any one of those things can get you. And yet in the West, we're moaning about wearing a mask. You know, it's like we really need to, the distinctions between privilege is such now that we really have, any one of us that has a platform has a duty to make sure that we are lifting the voices of the people that need to lead the next stuff. It's not going to be me that's going to lead the next stuff. I'm a middle-aged white, you know, what the world sees as a middle-aged white woman. I'm not going to lead the next stuff, and nor should I. The people that need to lead it will be the black and brown trans people that are coming up after me and doing a brilliant job. Travis Alabanza, the number of people, it is fabulous. So yeah, raise people up.
Thank you. I see you, Juno, as somebody who is so authentic, somebody who is living, walking, speaking their truth, and has given me actually more confidence to do that in the way that is true to me as well.
Brilliant.
So I really appreciate you and all the advice you give, and you completely speak from a place of like vulnerability and truth. Before I ask you my last question, I just wanted to know if there was any final messages that you wanted to give to the young people listening to us right now.
I just think something that you've just said, which is live your truth, you know, which is to kind of keep that, because that's all I've done. All I ever did, I'm not going to bang on about being a queer kid from Peckham, but I was from this really working class family. You know, I was literally the only one to really finish school. I was the only one to go to university, any of that stuff. But I was always, you know, I was told that I wouldn't do so much stuff. And I just kept on believing inside that I could do this stuff, and that books I could read, and I could have a beautiful space to live in, and I could have space full stop, and I might be able to be a writer. And even when I wrote my first book, somebody said, you know, I was told no one's going to read it, so you won't sell many copies, so you will never do another book. And you know, I have 3 books in the charts now, and my latest book is at number 1 on the audiobook charts for politics. So just live your truth, live your best truth. You know, as Kate Bornstein, the great kind of gender theorist, American theorist, says, you know, just live your truth and be kind to people. As long as you're being kind, as long as you're not hurting anyone and you're being kind, then things will be all right.
Thank you. And you going on about being a queer kid from Peckham, I think is important, because there'll be young people who are queer, who are trans, who are living with HIV or all of the above.
Yeah.
And hearing you and seeing where you are now is like, it will be phenomenal for them. So thank you for sharing that. My final question for you is, each year at camp, there is a theme, and this theme is superheroes. So I wanted to know, who is a superhero to you? Who's a hero to you, and why?
Right, you know, like, so like, and this sounds like, and I'm not trying to dodge the question, but a superhero to me is every single trans person that's come before me. Every single trans person who's managed to live their best life, who's managed to survive, who's managed to breathe, who's managed to be the best that they can be. So every single trans person upon whose shoulders I stand is a superhero to me. You know, like the black trans women who started Stonewall. You know, who stood up on a stage at a time when no one wanted them to stand up on a stage. You know, they are my superheroes, because on their shoulders I stand. I couldn't do any of this stuff that I do. I would be nowhere if it weren't for every single trans person that's gone before me, who's been treated badly, who's been treated well, who's been whatever, who's appeared to have an easy life, who's appeared to have a really tough life. You know, and there's a great book coming out next year, which I've just kind of been fed a bit, which is about trans people, I think, in West Africa. And you know, it's like, for every trans person that I've never met, who is not from the UK, who's not from London, who's not from Peckham, who's not from whatever, who has struggled to maintain and build their life in Africa or in Sweden or in wherever, all of them are my superheroes. I can't pick one, because you know, that takes it's a heroic effort. I interview in Gender Explorers, I interview 8-year-olds who on Friday night send their teacher and their parents an email that says, on Monday, I need to come into school as myself. I know this is going to upset you. I know it's going to cause some kind of new thing. You're going to have to get some new systems in the school, but I have to do this for me. And that's the only way I can go into school on Monday and be happy. And they're 8. They're 8. You know, there are superheroes all around us. So let's not look for our superheroes beyond. You know, they're all around us, and we all have that capacity. Every young person has the capacity to do great things with their lives. And they don't need to be great and big things. They don't need to be great celebrity things. They don't need to be notable events that will end up in a book. You know, you can do those kind of great things just walking down the street and being kind and making space for others, and recognizing that you've got enough space that now you need to give up some space to allow others to make space. And that's how we create new superheroes. Yeah.
Juno, thank you so much. I appreciate
Pleasure.
you sharing and just being with us in this space.
Absolute pleasure. You asking me questions is always a complete delight. So thank you.